So I'd like to introduce my colleague and my friend Pips Veazey, who's speaking today. She was born in Limestone, Maine. That's one great thing about her. She also went to college in Maine. She did her undergraduate degree in psychology at Bates College. I don't know exactly when she left for Alaska, but she spent quite a bit of time there. And while she's been there, she's played a number of leadership roles in the science community in that state, including relatively recently as the leader of a $20 million NSF EPSCoR project focused on changes in Alaskan ecosystems. That project and many others have included really innovative collaborations with Alaska's indigenous communities. And along the way, as she was doing this work, she got very interested in how researchers collaborate in this kind of space. And she did her PhD in team science leadership, which is what she'll be talking about today. That subject, sort of team science, collaboration among scientists, is also of great interest to many faculty and students who are connected to the Mitchell Center, who themselves have done a lot of pioneering research in this area, including probably 25, 30 peer-reviewed papers that they've published to push back the frontiers in this work. You hear a lot about students leaving Maine and kind of a brain drain. Gosh, all these wonderful young Mainers are leaving, but sometimes we get lucky and they come back. Pips is one example of that. She returned to lead something called Portland Gateway. I know she'll say a little bit more about this, but it's a very exciting new hub that is helping the University of Maine expand its collaborations. Just recently, many colleagues and I benefited from Pip's expertise and experience as we were working on a pretty ambitious proposal to grow the university's capacity for solving complex problems in Maine. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm going to turn it over to her. The title of her talk is Team Science and Lessons from Kindergarten, the Essence of Collaborative Research.
Thank you, David. I assume you can all hear me. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you all today. I'm going to share my screen and make sure that I do this correctly before I move on. Okay. So I've been watching the Mitchell Center for many years, and I'm always really impressed by the work that is being done here. I'm so pleased to be here at the University of Maine and working with David and Linda and others in a variety of different ways. I've had a lot of fun putting this talk together, and usually I spend a lot of time focusing on the details of my research. But for this one, I tried to take a big step back and really think about the essence of what we do as researchers, as Mainers, and as human beings bumping into each other at work. One of the questions that I've been interested in addressing is how we maximize the effectiveness of our teams in academic institutions in order to advance knowledge and solve the really challenging problems that we face today. Though as everyone at the Mitchell Center knows, this team stuff is exciting, but it can be really hard to do. So this made me think about where we all began our education, and the book that Robert Fulghum wrote in 1986 titled All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. So I look back at some of the things that he feels are important. Things like share things, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your mess, watch out, hold hands, stick together, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. In all seriousness, so much of this rings true for me in my work with large interdisciplinary, very accomplished research teams. And one of the biggest challenges that I experience is how to take these simple concepts and operationalize them with new teams. How do we share resources? How do we stay curious? And how do we stick together? How do we get to the heart of these issues in a way that resonates with adults who are researchers, who are smart and accomplished, and don't usually like being told to share everything and hold hands? As I get older, I'm aware of opportunities to be curious. Sometimes I have to work at being curious, but I feel like it's always worth it. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, go into a little bit more detail than David's nice introduction did. I'm going to talk about a little bit about team science, some of the lessons learned from working with research teams, which I've been doing for the last decade. kind of touch on some of the roles for future scientists, partly because I find myself in a role that wasn't clearly defined when I was getting my PhD, and then a little bit about the UMaine Portland Gateway as well. So as David said, I went to Bates College, and the day after I graduated from Bates and my best friend graduated from Colby, we drove to Alaska and spent 3 years longlining for halibut in the Bering Sea, and salmon fishing in Prince William Sound and other kind of miscellaneous jobs to make ends meet. One of those summers was interrupted by the Exxon Valdez oil spill after the tanker hit Bly Reef. I spent that summer working on and beside the Exxon Valdez, cleaning the tanks, working with the divers to stop the cracks in the hull and to prepare it for transportation down to the lower 48. So that was a turning point for me because I loved being on the water, but I was living at the nexus of these really conflicting images: big oil, commercial fishing, subsistence hunting, indigenous communities, remote wilderness and research teams. And I decided to stay in Alaska and work on a master's degree in oceanography at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. As a new graduate student, I spent my first summer working on the Greenland Ice Sheet project as a driller, coring through the Greenland ice sheet. This was the first big science team project that I was a part of, and I probably loved every minute of it. I got to work with these really energetic, smart, interesting people who were all part of this big effort to drill an ice core through the Greenland ice sheet and then bring it back to the lab for analysis. So this required engineers and glaciologists and cooks, project managers and funding agencies, technical experts, pilots, budget analysts, all of these people with diverse skill sets. And it was really fun. It was a great team. My own research as a master's student focused on sea ice in Antarctica, and I spent a semester on the icebreaker Polar Sea between Australia, Antarctica, and Chile, drilling much smaller ice cores through the fast sea ice around McMurdo Station, and trying to figure out then how to connect what we were doing with our ice cores to this idea of climate change, which seems absurd now, but I remember struggling with that as a master's student, thinking like, how am I going to make these big statements on this little tiny core that I have? So I was part of a small team there of 3 scientists, and we were lucky to have amazing support by the Coast Guard personnel in order to do this kind of work. So in Alaska, I was part, as David had said, part of the NSF EPSCoR project, the established program to stimulate competitive research, where I eventually served as the principal investigator and led a statewide research project examining 2 important aspects of Alaska: changes taking place along the coastal margins and wildfires in the boreal forest. This project has well over 100 people across the state doing research and working with partners to address economic and workforce development, science education and research, diversity enhancement efforts, all with this kind of goal to increase research capacity. So I had the fortune of working for and with some amazing people who taught me a lot about teamwork and leadership. And over the years, we then funded a number of efforts to help early career scientists and staff members focus on teamwork and leadership development and defining their own values around these topics. I really feel like that was some of the best spent funding. Taking the time to kind of explicitly address team development has been an important aspect with many of the teams that I interact today. So after spending almost 30 wonderful years exploring and raising kids and doing research in Alaska, I found my way back to Maine, which makes me very happy. Over the past decade, I've worked with lots of large interdisciplinary research teams across the country, and it's some of these experiences and what I've learned that I'm going to talk about a bit about today. The UMaine Portland Gateway is this new effort meant to provide a stronger connection between UMaine research and education and the Portland area. The work that we're doing through the Gateway to serve state needs and address the challenges that Mainers are experiencing, I hope will benefit not only UMaine, but our partners in higher education, University of Southern Maine, the Rue Institute, our community college system, our business partners through internships and Mainers, as we pull from these really rich resources of the University of Maine research that's been at the core of Maine knowledge building since 1865. Our university knows Maine well. So let's talk a little bit about team science and what that actually means. All of you have probably experienced being a member of a team in your life. Maybe they were small, maybe they were large. Maybe they were sports teams or research teams, but they all involved these interdependencies and at least two people. In that case, you probably also understand that developing and managing, leading large science teams is fraught with peril. This author, I like this quote, I use this a lot: the most significant barrier to successful translational research is the inability to create and sustain dynamic and innovative multidisciplinary research teams. In this complex environment, there are so many moving parts and complicated processes, and things can go off the rails. However, if we can develop great and effective teams, I think we can do amazing things together. So today I'm going to talk about team science. And while this might be obvious, I want to start with just a simple definition so we're all on the same page. So in 2015, the National Academies produced this consensus study on enhancing the effectiveness of team science. And they defined team science as a collaborative effort to address a scientific challenge that leverages the strengths and expertise of professionals trained in different fields. So that's what we're going to go with today. So while research teams and collaborative work has taken place for many decades, the science of team science, or SITES as we call it, has been around in a more formal manner for about 15 years, starting at the National Cancer Institute and work done by Kara Hall and others. You can see in this timeline the evolution of some of the national efforts to define and conceptualize team science. Of particular note is this map kind of in the top center that helps to identify and how the organizers and participants were reflecting the research agenda at that time in 2011. So this represents the research themes that people involved with team science at that time defined as critical to advancing the field. So while there has been a lot of research devoted to military teams, business teams, and sports teams, this notion of research being a team effort is a more recent field and has been informed by these other fields. So over the past 10 years, an increasingly prominent Science of Team Science annual conference, or the CITES conference, has brought together thought leaders and really and researchers in the field of team science. And now the International Network for the Science of Team Science has become a formal nonprofit organization. And that now provides a nice home for people studying the science of team science and a means of propelling this field into new lines of research. So while we've learned a lot about team science, there's still a lot we want to know. The consensus study indicated that there are ways to strengthen research teams to increase their effectiveness. And this is really important if you're a funder or a participant or a member of the public who wants to reap the results of research teamwork. So specifically, science points to interventions for assembling teams, for collaboration planning, which has kind of been at the heart of some of the work that I've been doing, providing professional development education opportunities, which is critically important, supporting leadership development opportunities, promotion and tenure credit, which is ongoing work, and study and the measurement of team science, which we have a lot to still do. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the work that I've done with research teams in order to help them be most effective, especially around collaboration planning. Let's take a moment to look at the various features of science teams. Some of you may have seen this already, but I want to talk about each one of these characteristics and what makes this work complex. First, we define science as at least 2 and up to 10 people involved in interdependent research. Beyond 10, we tend to talk about teams of teams. In terms of size, the bigger the team, the more productive they may be. However, that size increases the level of coordination required as well. Interdependence is a characteristic of a research team and is critical to advancing ideas, but integrating different methods of languages can require time and a willingness of participants. Boundaries of science teams are often permeable. Different skill sets may be required at different moments, and people may come and go. So thinking about those people who are coming and going and how you're interacting to learn from them is important. Many scientists work on more than one team and identify with various departments or institutes and projects. And if goals are not aligned across team members, conflicts may arise there as well. All science teams integrate information to some extent. As teams become more interdisciplinary in nature, it can be difficult to build on one another's knowledge across disciplinary boundaries. Diversity in membership can provide huge benefits, as we keep reading about in the news, but we must be mindful to support and manage that diversity by developing a shared understanding. And that shared understanding is something that I talk a lot about because it's not always easy or obvious to do. And now, as we know all too well, proximity of team members is a feature that we need to grapple with. We've become really adept at working across distances by paying attention to time zones and building moments for personal connections and such through the pandemic, but I don't think anybody thinks that that is necessarily an easy way to go. So to give you a sense of the most current work being done by the International Network of the Science of Team Science as an organization, I just wanted to show you this slide that lists our special interest groups, all of which are very productive and are looking for people to join the effort. So if you're interested in any of these, please get in touch with me. You can see the list varies. The various topics include team science, education and training, team incubation and acceleration, scientometrics and data analytics, fostering team science in academia, and interreach, which is the professional development and developing the profession, as their leader likes to say. So all of these groups are made up of Insights board members, committee leads, and people interested in developing a deeper understanding of team science. And it's a really exciting and forward-looking effort that's bringing people together to work on things like curriculum and expand best practices and translate the research into practical applications that people can really adopt. And we talk about this a lot in our organization. And that's really my passion, that translation piece. So early in my own career, I realized that as much as I loved doing research, I really loved working with people in the research world and found myself in a number of different science management and leadership roles. Team science was and is, I think, increasingly being funded by federal agencies, and I've had the great luck to work with lots of different types of leaders in the research world through engineering research centers, science and technology centers, NSF includes projects, EPSCoR projects, all of which were part of the National Science Foundation and others as well. So I really wanted to understand how to manage and lead these large interdisciplinary projects that required teams of highly skilled disciplinarians working together on complex issues, which sounds a lot like what the Mitchell Center does. This new effort around the science of team science at that time was developing just as I started my PhD, and I found this amazing, smart group of people interested in many of the same ideas that I was. Sandy Pentland works at MIT. He runs the connection space that helped to create the Media Lab at MIT. And he was really, he doesn't know this, but he was one of the inspirations for the work that I do. I happened to hear Sandy speak at a conference and I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. This guy can determine whether a team is going to be successful or not based on the data collected through these little things called sociometric badges that he put on people. And as I think back now on this now, his work really inspired me to bring so many pieces of team science and leadership together into how I operate today. I was reading back through his book recently to prepare for this talk, and I just kept thinking, oh, I didn't know that's where I got this idea. It was Sandy who kind of made me think about this. So these badges measure tone of voice. They measure whether people face one another when they talk, how much they gesture, how much they talk, listen, and interrupt one another, and things like that. And he can distill the essence of what it takes to be a good team based on these characteristics that he can measure with his badges. And so when what he realized is that individual intelligence, and probably not the first person to realize this, but he does state that individual intelligence, personality, skill, and everything else mattered less than the pattern of idea flow. And I just love the pattern of idea flow. Those words, the pattern of idea flow. Sandy talks about that creativity is connecting things, that when you ask a creative person how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. They connected experiences and ideas to create something new. And I feel like I have seen that time and time again. So his studies revealed that team performance was driven by these 5 measurable factors. First, everyone in the group talks and listens in roughly equal measure, keeping contributions short. Second, members maintain high levels of eye contact and their conversations and gestures are energetic. 3, members communicate directly with one another, not just with the team leader. 4, members carry on back channel conversations or side conversations within the team. And 5, members periodically break, go exploring outside of the team and bring information back to share with others. And I'm sure that you recognize many of these patterns in your own work. As scientists, I think we are offered the opportunity to do lots of these things through the work that we do. So as Sandy Pentland inspired my research. I'm a much better translator of research, I think, than traditional researcher, but I really did love working on my PhD. I was interested in understanding the competencies that are required to lead and manage these large interdisciplinary team science efforts. So I used group concept mapping, which is a technique that relies on experts to define ideas. We don't start with a hypothesis, we cultivate ideas from the experts in the field. So here's the final group concept map with 5 major concepts and 11 sub-concepts that convey what the experts that I worked with think is critical to team science management and leadership. Each idea about what it takes to lead and manage a science team is represented by a single dot. I think there's something like 115 dots. Generally, dots that are closer together represent similar ideas, and those that are farther apart, more different from one another. So the placement of these dots is mathematically calculated to show the relationship of every dot to every other dot, or every idea with every other idea. So while this method can tell us a lot about the topic that I'm not going to get into today, I do want to point out that the concepts that leaders need to know are things like project management, which seems kind of obvious, shared leadership, which I think is much more complex than it sounds, personal competence, social competence, and then communication. So those are the things that my research showed were really critical to leading and managing team science. And to dive into these concepts just a bit more, we're going to look at these very briefly and just kind of go through each one of the major categories. So project management was not a surprise. You know, it's more straightforward idea with specific applications of a body of knowledge around managing large projects. Really important to know how to do. Science management is a kind of a version of project management, and that's been evolving over time. Communication might be fairly obvious, not always easy, but a common theme in teamwork. And these experts broke it down into both internal to the team and external to the team communication strategies. The social and personal competence revolve around how we manage behavior, navigate social complexities, and make personal decisions. These made up 40% of the skill sets that experienced leaders identified as important. And then there's shared leadership. I believe one of the most important and interesting ideas to help new leaders understand. So many new team leaders feel like they have to know everything. They have to be able to do everything. They have to plan for every contingency. I absolutely felt that way. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. The whole reason for a team, the whole reason for shared leadership is that no one person can know everything that a large team is planning. So I believe that teams are best served when the leaders can come together to establish a plan that relies on shared competencies, skill sets, and knowledge of the members. And even then, there may be lots of things that the leadership team does not know. And that is what makes research teams really exciting. How can we encourage, support, and really build into an unknown future? So I have some ideas based on my work with teams, and these are the six things I'm going to tell you, just want to talk about today. So I want to turn a bit and share with you some of these. These are based on both leading science teams and science projects, and then doing some consulting over the last decade or so across the United States. Some of the people whose work has impacted the way I think about and do what I think about in terms of teamwork. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. I get really excited about using research to do stuff, to work with teams and help them be successful, and to try to serve as that translator between new ideas and the work of current teams. And we have lots of people in our organization who are really excited about the research of team science, and that's really, really important for me to do a good job at what I do. So these 6 elements jump out to me as some of the most important in terms of enhancing effectiveness. They're ideas that include listening, questioning, visualizing, collaborating, suspending belief, and facilitating. And I think facilitating is evolving as an art. So I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that too. And I do think they relate to the ideas that we learned in kindergarten, and that sometimes we need to find different ways of tapping into those ideas and reminding ourselves that these are important. So let's take listening, for instance. Again, as somebody from MIT that I've been able to watch and participate in lots of different ways with Otto Scharmer, and he talks about 4 levels of listening and conversing. And I'm just going to kind of go through each one, and maybe you can think about examples in your own lives where you've been doing these different kinds of listening. So the first is downloading. This is kind of the most basic and habitual form of listening. It's very direct. It occurs when the individual is familiar with what they're hearing or being told, and are therefore only listening to kind of confirm what they already know, or their current opinion, which is not maybe likely to change. So everything they're hearing is being projected onto these preconceptions of the situation, and is reflecting on past experiences rather than the moment and the present. Factual listening is the next stage, which involves listening with an entirely open mind and without any presumptions or prior judgments. So individuals employ factual listening when they're attentive to new ideas and data and are accepting of differences from what they already know. The outcome is that their opinions or views on a situation may be altered by new information. And this may be good for individuals in an analytic situation, but it's still not really suitable for those who need to be more visionary. Empathic listening is step 3. That requires a yet deeper level of listening and the needs of the individual at hand to have a certain level of emotional intelligence that we talked about a couple of slides ago. This is the ability to truly connect with the individual who is being listened to, and to see the world or the situation or the subject or opinion as they do through their eyes, and provides them with an emotional connection to the speaker. This provides the listener with alternative perspectives, which can help to sculpt and define their decision-making. And then the 4th and final level of listening is generative listening. This is the highest, most kind of informative level, and is important skills for leaders to learn. It requires an individual to gain a connection with the best future that they can. An emerging and developing future or possible futures is a very future-focused way of listening. And this results in a profound, or can result in a shift and a deep sense of knowing. So if you have never seen Otto Scharmer's work, I encourage you to look up Theory U and his Presencing Institute, with which I've been involved several times, to learn more about these ideas. So listening is important, questioning is important. Questioning may be, oh, sorry, forgot to advance my slide there. Questioning is as important as listening for research teams. So questioning is a process that seeks to foster curiosity, imagination, and innovation. Warren Berger describes a beautiful question as an ambitious yet actionable question that can begin to shift the way we perceive or think about something, and that might serve to bring about change. We tend to try to use questions such as why, what if, and how. And also from design thinking, I really like the word might. How might we do this, or what might that look like? In the book, A More Beautiful Question, Berger highlights the importance of replacing brainstorming with the practice of question storming, because he feels it allows for creativity to solve a problem. And so frequently we will in our teams talk about all the questions that we can ask about an issue, rather than the good answers that we may be able to develop right away. Partly because that promoting question or promoting solutions right away can really inhibit some people and prove to be too big a hurdle to cross at a certain point. So I really believe there's a time for both of these activities, both brainstorming and question and asking questions as well. Oh, somehow my thing keeps advancing when I do not want it to. Okay. not going to touch my mouse for a moment. Visualizing information. So we talked about listening, questioning, and now I want to talk about visualizing. Visualizing information is another critical element to working in complex environments. This is a poster from a project in Alaska that brought together interdisciplinary research teams looking at changes to Alaska, team science leadership that we discussed earlier, and now data visualization. And these three elements were the foundation of the work that our teams were addressing, regardless of the topics that range from things like oceanographic modeling and emergency planning, circumpolar security, open source mapping, town planning, proposal development, lots of these, really different kinds of topics. Our team built this visualization space in order to bring people together in these small teams and to also have access to an amazing amount of information on these 7 screens. And the whole idea was to develop a common understanding as we talked about a particular topic. These moments and this space were really critical for externalizing cognition. So thinking about something and maybe drawing something or developing a map together or creating a plan together. And that idea of developing a common mental model and generating ideas for the future was something that we spent a lot of time doing. This idea of a shared mental model is really important for people working in large interdisciplinary research teams. And I've noticed that if the team is responsible for creating the conceptual model themselves, not the leader saying, okay, I've figured out the conceptual model, here we go, we got it figured out. If the team can develop and create a shared mental model of the work, ideas progress differently and faster than if the team does not take the time to do this. You can imagine that if every member of a large team has a slightly different mental model of the work, that it's hard to make progress. I can't tell you how many times we kind of had to backtrack. We'd have a bi-weekly meeting and I think, man, I feel like we just talked about this 2 weeks ago. And so we started using this visualization space and creating images and conceptual maps and all sorts of shared documents in order to help us move forward as a team, and it really made a big difference. So another piece of what I want to talk about today was collaboration planning. That I think also can make a big difference in how a team begins and evolves. So over the past, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, I worked with lots of teams to help them co-create their own collaboration plans. And in my opinion, working on the plan is really just as helpful as the plan itself and can help establish and promote trust across right at the beginning of a project. So there's risk in hoping or assuming that you will have interpersonal agreement within your team, and being explicit about trust and team roles can be challenging, but it's also an effective collaboration tool. It's difficult to achieve trust if you're not explicit about what you're going to expect from one another. And discussing these elements of collaboration can help a team come together and be very explicit about what the expectations are. It also helps focus on quality. The focus on the collaboration plan can increase the quality of both scientific and relational interactions in teams. So this approach outlined here by Bennett and others list, I think, 10 different elements, including rationale for team approach, technological readiness, team functioning, communication and coordination, conflict prevention, and management, and other topics. So not all teams choose to address every one of these elements, but it's really been interesting to see how different teams create their collaboration plans. There was a team in Alaska that was really fun to work with, and they called their collaboration plan Soup, Saunas, and Science because they like to get together and they called it disciplinary vagabonding. They would get together and have dinner and take a sauna and talk about science. And lots of teams now that I work with talk about sharing food together, having dinners together, but it's all very specifically focused on the team that is actually creating the collaboration plan. There's a notion of suspending belief that I like to discuss with research teams at the start of a project. I think our instinct is to quickly form a model of people and ideas based on the information that we have at hand, that snap judgment. Abraham Lincoln knew these instincts were just hypotheses. I don't like that person, and called for an effort to prove it. I must get to know him better. So scientists say that these SNAP hypotheses are often justified and maybe correct, but also that as rational beings, we should be motivated by reason to constrain our impulses and look into things further. So next time you identify a SNAP judgment, try to recognize it as an instinct. Step outside that judgment and challenge yourself on it. I regularly ask teams to purposefully suspend judgment when we're together in order to advance ideas and build a solid shared understanding. That's not easy to do, but when you practice it and you have questions and listening and collaboration and visualization all together, it's really an exciting thing. So in 2017, this article was published in the Harvard Business Review by the Surgeon General of the United States. I thought it was interesting that I was looking back on this. Before the pandemic, the Surgeon General defined loneliness as an epidemic that we needed to address as a nation. And we know that has shifted since then, looking at the numbers of people who report being lonely today. Loneliness and these weak social connections are associated with a reduction in lifespan, even more so than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or that caused by obesity. So I thought it was perplexing that here we are doing all of this collaborative work in interconnected teams with multiple colleagues, yet we appear to be lonelier than ever. And Murthy says that loneliness is the subjective feeling of having inadequate social connections, and that some of the reason that that's happening is due to geographic mobility, people moving away from their families and their friends, being able to move around easily, telecommuting, and kind of task-oriented computer work. So many of us spend a lot of time at work with colleagues. And so what does this say about how we might do our work? So over the first year of the pandemic, our team in Alaska, we started meeting 3 mornings a week just to touch base about whatever the team wanted to address, personal things, work things, anything at all. And it kind of came down to, we probably spent 50% of the time talking about whatever people want to talk about with their lives. You know, a kid fell down and hurt her hand, or, you know, mom was coming to visit, or how are they going to fly, you know, to California during the pandemic, you know, whatever things came up. And then we'd talk about work as well. So the advice that the Surgeon General gives, and something that I like to pay attention to, is take stock in what you have at work, build an understanding of what high quality relationships might look like, make strengthening the social relationships a priority, and encourage people to reach out for help, create opportunities for people to get to know one another. And I like those 5 things. I try to encourage our team to spend more time thinking about what it means to be a team. Roles in science are changing. And this is a slide that was made by one of the special interest groups leaders, the Interreach leader, Christine Hendren. So in addition to traditional science careers, we see many practitioners like myself who are connected to research and are finding training in a number of different places. This was developed as a visual to depict a number of different yet related careers in team science today. I can share this with you later, but I just wanted you to see that there's just ongoing work in the team science community to develop curricula, to teach students how to approach team science and learn the skills required to be good team science members and leaders, and that people are examining, expanding the idea of what it means to facilitate team events and complex dialogues. That idea of facilitation, I don't think that word really gets at a lot of what we do as team science leaders and managers. Actually working with a group across the country right now in trying to identify and expand that notion of what a facilitator is. And so there's different roles here. There's an integration and implementation specialist. There's a research development professional. There are interdisciplinary executive scientists, community engagement managers, and they don't all share exactly the same skills or competencies, but they overlap, and we see them more and more being funded in various proposals. So I think it helps to propel these ideas by encouraging people to listen deeply, to understand different perspectives, ask probing and expansive questions, encourage and develop a shared understanding across the team, and then promoting these social connections among team members such that everyone feels valued and safe and engaged. Team science leaders can help with that. So I carry these values of collaboration and inclusion and societal relevance to my work through the UMaine Portland Gateway. And I hope that the UMaine Portland Gateway is a small piece of the puzzle in helping Maine address its most vexing problems. Initial ideas from my listening sessions across the university has shaped the beginning of this vision for what the Gateway might become. And I certainly welcome your ideas. So establishing a culture of teamwork, creativity, and possibility that's inclusive of all Mainers is core to the Gateway. So please let me know how I can support you down here in Portland. And in closing, I'd like to recognize the research records that are being set here in Maine. We're well primed to make significant advances in the coming years to address the issues that are central to the well-being of Mainers. I've been so impressed with the UMaine team and also people from around the Maine University system that I've had a chance to visit. The leadership and staff around research support and development, coupled with these world-class faculty members and an ecosystem in Maine that's future-facing and full of possibility and needs people who can work together, ask questions, and bring people to the table to address these serious challenges, makes for a dynamic and optimistic ecosystem. So last year I made this trek across the North American continent between the two northern tippy points of the US, Alaska and Maine. And I decided that I would adopt Mary Oliver's approach to life and remind myself not only to stay curious, but to tell people about it. And I hope that some of my curiosity has been interesting or helpful or encouraging to you. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks. Thanks, Pips. Thanks, Linda, for applauding again. And for people in the room that haven't met my colleague, Linda Silka, before, she's a senior fellow here. She was the former director of the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center and a psychologist. So she and Pips at least have some shared background going way back. And Linda and I are going to do this by a bit of juggling, I suspect. So anybody in the room that has questions, just raise your hand, let me know. Linda has questions that have come in through the chat. And I have, if I get a chance, I have some questions too. So Linda, why don't you go first?
Great. Pips, my first thing that I'm going to say is, how can we follow you around?
No, how can I follow you all around?
So one of the really interesting questions that came through the chat is getting, I think, at the heart and soul of what's challenging about this is, how do you foster interdisciplinarity, but still retain respect for independent thought and ownership of concepts by individuals? So that tension there. What are your thoughts about that?
That is really at the heart of what we're talking about, isn't it? And one of the words that has come up a whole lot for me in the past 4 months is this idea of friction. And in working with some interdisciplinary teams who were explaining what their research was about on a panel recently, we kept talking about this idea of friction. Some teams said, "Oh, we don't have any friction. Everything's good. No need to worry." And other teams said, "Oh my God, we have friction every day, but we work it out. We have interpersonal friction that we grapple with, and that's not a big deal. But we have all of this disciplinary friction. And that's where the really exciting things happen, right? Because if you all agreed, you're not really doing teamwork. You're just kind of propelling something that already exists. But if there's friction and you get to debate ideas and you get to ask questions in a respectful manner, and you get to kind of pull apart ideas, that's when I think interdisciplinary research is really exciting, and that's what we strive for. I would say, disciplinary science is critical, it's fundamental to being able to do interdisciplinary work. We can't all be generalists, we can't all be interdisciplinary scientists. It's really important that we have these struggles, that we have, and that's where, like, I think facilitation and that team science leader is so critically important for setting the stage and being able to bring people together and still have these head knocking moments where we're trying to figure something out together that's difficult, and we may see it from different perspectives, and to be able to ask questions. And again, it's like suspending that sense of belief for a little while. Like, I know what I know and I know where I've come from, but I don't know what you know and where you came from. And to be able to step back and say, I just want to try to understand that better. I'm not preparing my response yet. I really want to understand what you have to say.
Very, very interesting. The title is great, about what we learned in kindergarten or didn't learn. And do you have any sense of whether we should be doing some things earlier, say in undergraduate education, that both helps people keep their disciplinary focus, but also really prepares them for the kind of rich experience you're telling us about?
100% yes. And I don't think it starts with undergraduate. I think it starts in like first grade. And this I witnessed my 3 girls who are now all out of college being given team projects when they were in first, second, and third grade. And the teacher would say, here, do this. And there was a little bit of, helping, and they were fairly easy things to wrap their minds around. And then they got to middle school, and they were still kind of not given, I don't believe, the support and the instruction that they needed to understand how to work in a team. And so it was really, really frustrating for them. And it remained frustrating all through high school because we didn't stop to take the time to talk about what it actually means to be in a team. So pretty much every proposal that I put in now has an element of can we teach, can we back up that time frame and start teaching people how to work in teams, especially in science teams, because I don't think that's what a lot of younger students really conceptualize as what their future could be. So we have started doing that in everything. And that's why I think the International Network of the Science of Team Science, those special interest groups that are really coming together in a very collaborative national kind of way to talk about what that curricula could look like, is really important.
That's very helpful, very interesting.
Hey, Linda.
Yeah.
Could I take a turn here in the room?
You sure can, yes.
Great, thanks. So by the way, if I'll probably repeat your question because we're not sure if everybody's going to be able to hear. Go ahead.
Oh, great.
I was curious because a lot of questions are very complicated. Where would you start if you wanted to research what like, right, this is where we're going to start researching it, or something that seems, if you start from so many different angles, it seems like a different start at all.
Okay, I'm going to try repeating that. I don't know if either of you could hear any, right? That's what I figured. And I might not do a great job, but we'll get it. So the question is, and what's your name, please?
Shaylin Huber?
Yeah, Shaylin Huber has asked, this is a pretty complex system problem, if you will, that could be approached in a lot of different ways. If you want to study it, do research on it. Was that right? You want to actually, so like, what are some entry points to get a handle on how this works? What some of the impediments are? What best practices look like? How to link sort of research with practice? Is that even close? Okay. Did you hear all that, Pips? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. That National Academies study from 2015 is a great place to start. And even though it was done 5 years ago, there's a ton of really good information in there. And maybe this is too concrete an answer, so I apologize, and let me know if you're thinking about something different. But also there's a Mendeley site. I don't know if you're familiar with software called Mendeley, but it's a reference manager, and there's actually there's a whole body of work that has been collected over 10 years that people have access to there, and I can send out those links. There are also, the International Network of the Science of Team Science. If you're interested in this kind of work, I currently serve on the board, and I've been on the board for the last 3 years since the first moment that we were an organization. I'm very happy to get people connected in that, and we always welcome, students, early career faculty members getting involved, even if they're, haven't done research yet or they're interested in learning. So I would say that those maybe are great places to start. There's a lot of literature, and if you're just kind of starting to sift through this, it feels a little bit daunting. But and then also please use me as a resource. If people have specific questions, I'd love to help get you connected with people who are doing the cutting edge research in the United States right now and beyond. We've just started partnering with the interdisciplinary group in Europe, who is very similar to Insight. So on Friday, we're hosting a part of the workshop to join our 2 organizations and think about synergies among our 2 organizations. So there's lots of things out there, lots of ways of getting involved and understanding kind of where the big questions are coming from right now. And I'm happy to get people connected with those.
Great. Your turn, Linda.
Okay, great. So interesting. Pips, one of the things that's been intriguing listening to you, and then also thinking about the experiences that we have had, is that frankly, sometimes from administrators, we hear that early career scientists, we should not encourage them in this direction. If they're at a university, they should wait until they get tenure and then they can do this, which kind of goes opposite to part of what you have been saying. Could you give us your thoughts on that? Do we need to be spending a lot more time with administrators to help them see the value?
I absolutely think that's a piece of the puzzle, Linda. I do think we need to make the case and educate administrators, and that takes time and effort. And there are some universities that are doing this very well and have been doing it very well for a number of years now. So looking to them to say, what did you do and how can we follow suit? So education is huge. The idea of using alternative metrics instead of, how many papers have you written and how many times were you the first author, using alternative metrics that might include social media. It might include, your role on a research project. Were you a manager? Were you a leader? Did you lead a team? Were you there for, the idea inception? And those kind of qualitative moments where you can talk about what your contribution actually was. And I think that gets maybe back, that's for me very much related to authorship guidelines. And I've worked with teams who spend a lot of time talking about authorship guidelines just in order to make sure that credit is given to people who might be earlier in their stages of their careers and need to show that that this has been an important contribution and time that they've spent. So it is a problem, but other institutions are doing it well, so we should learn from them.
Great. And can I ask another question,
Yeah,
David?
go for it.
Okay. So this one is, could you please contrast team science that primarily involves multiple disciplines versus one involving multiple knowledge systems like Western knowledge and Indigenous knowledge?
Yeah, I would say the fundamental way I approach them is similar. And that's where the idea of putting together a collaboration plan can be really helpful. And I've worked with groups that have a very wide range of worldviews and cultural histories. And the conversations are rich and different. They typically involve how we are coming together, where that happens, how we're describing the collaboration. Some of the indigenous Southwestern communities that I've worked with, talk about these family dinners, and they're just using we are using very different words to describe what those collaborations look like and feel like. But at the very essence of what we're doing is, regardless of what group of people, we are coming together to talk about how we're going to work together. That's the fundamental kind of approach of a collaboration plan. And that allows you, with a skilled facilitator, that allows you the whole idea, or the whole way, maybe, I guess, let me step back. The way I approach collaboration planning is to facilitate a conversation of the team members. So it is not an external person saying, this is how your team is going to operate. It is providing the opportunity for that particular team to develop a specific collaboration plan that works for that team. And that's going to be really different depending on who the members are. But the process, I think, is the same. I think it's really important that this is something that's co-developed by the team.
Thank you.
Is that it, Linda?
Yeah.
Okay, great, because I think we're just about at time. And Pips, I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm going to save them for later.
Oh, good. Yours are probably going to be the hard ones, David. So
No.
And the first comment from my side was, how can we follow you around? Even stronger feeling that we just want to learn from you. It's very exciting.
Yeah. We're glad to have you. We're sorry it took you 30 years to get back here, Pips, but we're really glad you finally made it.
Oh, I'm just seeing I'm so happy to be here, and I'm seeing the
Chat.
Yeah, I'm seeing the chat. I'm not sure why the slides were fuzzy, but I'm happy to share the slide deck.
Cool.
That
Yep.
wasn't distracting.
Great. So Pips, thank you so much for being here today, for the things we did together recently.
Thank you all very much.
And thanks to the students, and thanks to the virtual audience. I hope you can be back next week. Okay, take care, everybody.